Found out my wife was cheating for months. Did I confront her right away? No. I stayed silent, planned, and made sure she paid for every lie. This is how it changed both our lives forever. I never thought I'd be the kind of man telling this story. I'd been married to Claire for 14 years. We had a nice little house in the suburbs, 2 kids in high school, and what I thought was a solid marriage. I worked as a project manager for a construction company. She was a part-time event planner. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I always figured we were in it for the long haul. Then, about a year ago, I started noticing little changes. At first, it was nothing I could put my finger on, just an energy shift. She started dressing up more, even for grocery runs. She'd smile at her phone, then quickly lock it when I walked into the room. And the perfume, that same expensive bottle she'd had for months, was suddenly running out a lot faster. I told myself it was probably just work stress. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me. But the first real gut punch came one Saturday morning when she said she was going to help a client with a last-minute wedding rehearsal. She left at 9 a.m. I had no reason not to believe her, until my buddy Mark texted me a photo from downtown. It was Claire walking arm in arm with a man I'd never seen before, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. I didn't confront her that night, or the next night. Instead, I started paying closer attention. I checked our cell phone bill, and there it was. A new number showing up every single day. Dozens of texts, late-night calls, all at odd hours when she'd claimed to be finalizing event details. I could have blown up right then. But something in me snapped in a different way. I didn't want just a fight. I wanted the truth, and then I wanted justice. So I started my own little investigation. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to confront Claire until I had everything. Every text, every meeting, every detail. I wanted her to know when the time came that I hadn't just found out, I had known for months. I bought a cheap second phone and a tiny GPS tracker off Amazon. The tracker was no bigger than a matchbox, and one afternoon while she was showering, I slipped it under the passenger seat of her car. That little device became my silent witness. Every time she said she was going to meet a client, I'd check the tracker and see her parked for hours in the same location, an apartment complex on the other side of town. I didn't stop there. I installed a hidden camera in our living room disguised as an air freshener. I wasn't expecting to catch anything in the house. I knew she wasn't that reckless, but I wanted to record her mood before and after her work trips. And sure enough, I'd watch her leave in jeans and a sweater, only to return hours later with perfect hair and that perfume clinging to her like she'd just bathed in it. The more I saw, the calmer I got. It was like I'd gone numb, no shouting, no accusations. Just quiet note-taking. I started saving screenshots of her call logs, archiving location pings from the tracker, and even keeping receipts she'd accidentally leave lying around. Dinner for 2 at a steakhouse, hotel bar tabs, all paid in cash. Then one night, luck handed me the key to the whole thing. She left her laptop open on the couch while she went to tuck the kids in. Her email was pulled up, and there it was, an entire thread of messages between her and David. David, a 39-year-old freelance photographer. Married with a wife named Julia. He wasn't just her fling, they had a little fantasy world together. Jokes about me, plans for weekend getaways, even talk of maybe one day living together. That's when my plan shifted. This wasn't just going to be about catching Claire. David was going to feel it too. I found Julia on Facebook. No mutual friends, but her profile was public enough to see wedding photos, a few posts about their dog, and a picture from just a week earlier of her and David at some charity dinner. She looked like she trusted him completely. I wondered if she had any idea. I decided she'd find out, but not yet. From that night forward, every interaction with Claire was a performance. I became the picture-perfect husband. Flowers for no reason, date nights, asking about her day like I genuinely cared about every word. Inside, I was memorizing her tells, her little lies. She grew comfortable. Too comfortable. The sneaking around got bolder. She'd work late 3 times a week, sometimes not even bothering to bring her laptop home anymore. Meanwhile, I started a quiet friendship with Julia, David's wife. I didn't reveal who I was. I approached her through a photography hobby group on Facebook, something she'd posted about often. Over the next few weeks, we chatted casually about cameras, good spots for photos, even shared a few laughs about bad weather ruining shoots. She had no clue I was studying her life, learning her routines. The idea for the big reveal came when Claire told me she'd be away for a weekend seminar in mid-October. That same weekend, David was supposedly going on a guys' camping trip, according to Julia's posts. Perfect. I booked us, me, Claire, David, and Julia, all at the same high-end restaurant downtown. Julia didn't know yet she was coming. I planned to invite her the day of, under the guise of a surprise dinner from a mutual friend. The beauty of the plan was in its simplicity. Claire thought I was heading out of town that weekend to visit an old college friend. She'd be free to spend the weekend with David without suspicion. In reality, I'd be at home, putting the final touches on the kind of evening that would blow both their perfect little lives wide open. And because I wanted to be thorough, I prepared evidence packets. Neatly printed GPS logs, screenshots of texts, copies of emails, and a USB stick with video clips from the hidden camera. One for Julia, one for Claire's parents, and one for my lawyer. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted the confrontation to happen in public, where their faces would betray them in real time. I wanted them both to feel that icy wave of panic when they realized the game was over. The last step? Calling the restaurant and booking a private dining room, for 4. That Saturday evening, I put on my best suit, the one Claire had bought me for our anniversary 2 years ago. She thought I was on the road by now, headed for a weekend away. In reality, I was parked 2 streets over from David's apartment, watching through tinted glass as the two of them stepped out together, dressed to the nines. They were laughing, that kind of laugh people reserve for the thrill of secrecy. I followed at a distance as they drove to the restaurant, completely oblivious. Inside, the maitre d' led them straight to the private room I had reserved. Claire looked confused for a split second but brushed it off, assuming David had made arrangements. I waited until they were seated, menus in hand, before stepping through the door. The moment was cinematic. Claire's smile froze, her hand still resting on David's arm. David's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the door as if looking for an escape route. "Evening," I said casually, pulling out a chair. "Hope you don't mind, I invited someone else to join us." That's when Julia walked in. She stopped dead, her eyes scanning the table. First David, then Claire, then me. She didn't need an explanation. For a few seconds, the air was so thick you could hear the faint clink of a fork from the next room. Then Julia turned to David, her voice ice cold. "How long?" David stammered. Claire tried to speak, but I cut her off by sliding the evidence packet onto the table. "Long enough," I said. Julia opened the envelope. I watched her face shift from confusion to shock to fury as she scanned the photos, the timestamps, the texts. Claire didn't touch hers. She just stared at me, her cheeks pale. "You planned this," she whispered. "Every second," I replied. "And I'm not done." I stood, motioned for Julia to follow, and we walked out together, leaving them sitting there, trapped with each other, the wreckage of their lies laid out between them. Outside, Julia took a deep breath. "What now?" she asked. I smiled. "Now, we both move on. But first, I think we send these to a few people who deserve to know." And that night, their world collapsed, not in a dramatic explosion but in the quiet, irreversible way truth always does. The fallout started faster than I expected. By Monday morning, everyone in Claire's world knew, her family, her friends, even her boss. Julia had sent the photos to David's parents, who, by the way, were not the forgiving type. His father called him a disgrace in a voicemail Julia later forwarded to me, and his mother apparently refused to even speak to him. Claire moved out 2 days later. She didn't take much, just clothes, a few personal things, and the wedding album which I told her she could keep. I had no use for it anymore. I could tell she wanted to explain, maybe even justify, but I didn't give her the chance. I'd spent too many nights thinking about her words, wondering how many of them had been lies. David lost more than Claire. Julia took him for everything she could in the split, house, car, savings. And because Julia and I had shared everything we found, she had enough leverage to make him fold quickly. Turns out, his successful career was built on fragile contracts his company wasn't renewing once his reputation tanked. As for me, I didn't rush into anything. I focused on my work, spent time with friends I'd neglected, reconnected with my younger brother, and even picked up guitar again. Something I hadn't touched in years because Claire always said it was too noisy. One night, a few months later, I bumped into Julia at a local bookstore. She looked happier, lighter. We grabbed coffee, talked for hours, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like my life was defined by betrayal. Here's the thing people don't tell you about revenge. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't heal the wounds. But in my case, it gave me closure. It gave me the satisfaction of knowing I wasn't crazy, that I had seen things for what they were, and that I refused to be made a fool of any longer. Claire tried reaching out once more, a single text. "I miss you." I never replied. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't the big dramatic scene, or even the meticulous trap you set. Sometimes it's just walking away, and never looking back. If you were in my position, would you have confronted her right away, or taken your time like I did? And what's the best revenge you've ever seen or done yourself? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments. I read them all.
I thought my husband was working late until I caught him with someone else. He expected tears and forgiveness. Instead, I gave him and his mistress a night they'll never forget. I used to believe my husband, Mark, was the kind of man who'd never cheat. We met in the early 2000s, bonded over late-night runs to the diner, and spent our 20s building a life together: first apartment, shared bank account, and eventually, a little 3-bedroom house with a bright yellow kitchen I'd always dreamed of. For a long time, I thought we were solid. Sure, we had the usual arguments about bills or who forgot to take out the trash, but there was still laughter. Or at least, I thought there was. It started small, Mark guarding his phone like it contained nuclear codes, turning it face down on the table, taking work calls outside. I told myself I was overthinking, that work was stressful and he needed space. But then came the late nights. The traffic jams that made him an hour late, the mysterious scent of a floral perfume that sure as hell wasn't mine. The breaking point? A Tuesday evening in October. He came home smelling freshly showered at 9:30 p.m. Claimed he'd gone for a run after work. Except his running shoes were still by the door, untouched. That night, I stopped telling myself stories. I started looking for the truth. The next morning, I woke up before Mark and checked his phone while he was in the shower. Nothing. Not a single suspicious text. The man had clearly mastered the art of covering his tracks. But he'd made one mistake: his smartwatch was still on the nightstand. I wasn't even thinking about technology at first, but then I realized it was synced to his phone. I opened the Messages app on the watch and, jackpot. There they were. Dozens of texts to someone saved as Aaron from work, except Aaron was very into talking about how much he'd missed Mark last night. Explicitly. My hands were shaking, but I didn't want him to know I'd found anything. Not yet. Instead, I took photos of the messages with my own phone, then started keeping a small notebook hidden in my nightstand. Every late night, every odd expense on our shared bank account, every work trip, I logged it. I also started making changes. I opened a separate bank account in my name only. Transferred a little money here and there from my paychecks, just enough to not raise suspicion. I quietly spoke to a divorce lawyer recommended by my coworker. She told me the more evidence I had, the cleaner my exit would be. The hardest part was pretending. Smiling when he came home late. Asking about his day like I still cared. It felt like being in a play I hated, but the performance was necessary. Because if Mark was going to blow up our marriage, I was going to make sure he set himself on fire in the process. Through my notes and bank statements, I pieced together a pattern. Every other Thursday, Mark had a networking dinner downtown. Always the same upscale restaurant. Always a $180 to $220 charge. So one Thursday, instead of heading home after work, I parked across the street from that restaurant. At 7:18 p.m., I saw him, suit jacket, easy smile, holding the door for a woman I'd never seen before. She wasn't Erin from work. She was maybe in her late 20s, long dark hair, laughing like she already knew every joke in his book. I watched them take a table by the window. She reached across and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. For the next hour, I sat in my car with the AC on, my camera phone zoomed in, taking photo after photo. But here's where it got interesting. 2 weeks later, I went to that same restaurant alone. Sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and accidentally dropped my scarf right near her table. She was with a friend this time, no Mark in sight. When I picked up the scarf, I smiled and said, "Oh, I think I've seen you around before. Do you work in marketing?" Her eyes lit up. She said she did, for the same company as Mark. And then she casually mentioned she was dating someone there. She didn't give a name. She didn't need to. That night, I knew exactly how I was going to end this, but it had to be public, undeniable, and unforgettable. I didn't want just a confrontation. I wanted a scene that would live rent-free in their heads for years. Mark's company held an annual awards banquet in December, formal attire, spouses invited, big ballroom at a hotel. I knew she'd be there. I also knew Mark would insist I come, partly to keep up appearances. Perfect. 2 weeks before the event, I anonymously emailed the photos of them at the restaurant, along with screenshots from his errand from work texts to the HR director at his company. The email simply said, "Thought you should know what your award-winning employee is doing with a junior staff member on company time." The banquet night came. I wore my red dress, the one Mark always said made me too noticeable. Good. I wanted to be noticed. At the start of the dinner, the HR director made a little speech about professional conduct before awards were handed out. I saw the flicker of worry cross Mark's face. Halfway through the evening, just as dessert was served, I stood up, raised my champagne glass, and said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "Here's to my husband, Mark, and to Emily, for keeping him so entertained during all those late nights at the office." You could have heard a pin drop. Emily's face went white. Mark stammered something, but it didn't matter. Everyone at that table knew. I left before dessert was finished. By the time I got home, I'd already blocked his number and sent him an email from my lawyer. The next morning, my phone was flooded with texts from mutual friends and a few of Mark's coworkers. Apparently, after I left the banquet, Emily ran to the bathroom in tears, and Mark tried to explain himself, which only made things worse. The HR director pulled them both aside before the night ended. By Monday, Emily had resigned from the company. I later found out it wasn't entirely voluntary. Mark, meanwhile, was put on some kind of professional probation for inappropriate conduct with a subordinate. His chances for promotion? Gone. I moved out 2 weeks later. Because I'd already set up my own bank account and had all the proof I needed, the divorce went through smoothly, at least for me. Mark tried calling, begging to work things out, but all I could think was, he didn't mind blowing up our marriage, he just hated being the one caught in the blast. As for me? I won't lie, the first few weeks alone were strange. Quiet. But one morning, I woke up, made coffee in my little apartment, and realized I could breathe again. No more pretending. No more double-checking bank statements or looking for lies in his smile. People ask me if I regret doing it so publicly. Not at all. Mark wanted excitement? I gave him the most exciting night of his career, just not the kind he had in mind. And that, honestly, was the sweetest revenge.
This story isn't just about cheating. It's about realizing that sometimes, to survive, you have to stop playing the victim and start playing by your own rules. Not everyone has the guts to go all the way, but when they do, the consequences can be brutal and unforgiving. What would you do if you were in her shoes?